Superhumanize. Accelerated evolution.
Imagine stepping into a place where the boundaries between medicine, fitness, and holistic health blur, where every aspect of your well-being is addressed under one roof. This visionary approach is the brainchild of our guest today, Dr. Ryan Greene. Dr. Greene is an osteopathic physician and the innovative co-founder of Monarch Athletic Clubs, groundbreaking facilities that integrate preventive medicine, physical therapy, and advanced fitness training. With a master's degree in exercise physiology, immunology, and human nutrition from the University of Illinois, and postgraduate training at both Dartmouth and the Mayo Clinic, his expertise runs deep. Beyond Monarch, Dr. Greene serves as the Medical Director for TheraBody, where he leverages cutting-edge recovery technologies. His comprehensive, evidence-based methodology is setting new standards in health and wellness. Today, we'll explore the future of integrative medicine, the science behind his innovative approaches, and actionable insights to enhance your well-being. Dr. Greene, welcome to the Superhumanize podcast. Great to connect with you today.
Beautiful to connect with you as well. I've been looking forward to it.
Me too. And as I have researched your background, all the amazing things you are doing, I just felt such a resonance. I am not a healthcare professional, but we have been dealing with a lot of similar issues, philosophy-wise, approach-wise in our business as you have. And what I've seen also in my network of friends who are in healthcare, there seems to be this experience of a disconnect between the aspirations and the realities of clinical practice for many of them. And I'd love to know from you, Dr. Greene, can you share more about your personal, so to call it, crisis of conscience during your residency and how it shaped your vision for changing the paradigm of optimizing health?
Yeah, it's been pretty interesting. I believe most people who go into healthcare view what healthcare is with rose-colored glasses, so to speak. It's aspirational, as you alluded to. They have goals they want to accomplish. They're altruistic in terms of why they want to be in healthcare, which I fully believe. The unfortunate part is the healthcare system as it's currently designed makes it very difficult for people to pursue what brought them in originally. Costs, insurance regulations, time. So the ability to truly connect with a patient and potentially provide the greatest opportunity for them to heal is restricted. And it's not restricted by lack of compassion or care. It's opportunity. And opportunity is not only time, but also money. And at the end of the day, when hospitals are barely breaking even, they need to continue to figure out how they can increase their capacity to generate revenue. Otherwise, they don't exist, which is a real consideration. So when I was in the healthcare space, it wasn't as much about money or time. I think I was surprised that initially when I went in, I wanted to be in the surgical space because it made sense for me that if I saw a problem, I could fix it with my hands or tools. Versus traditional medicine, which we think of as medicine, is I see a number on a lab chart that looks off. I'm going to give you a pill that will hopefully correct that. That didn't really feel personal to me. But also at the same time, I didn't want to deal with kind of what I called lower level, higher yield problems, obesity, heart disease, diabetes, things like that. So I went in the surgical space. But as I was in there and I was training, I was not only looking at my attending physicians who are incredible teachers, but also were essentially projections of what my life would be like in 20 to 30 years, as well as just seeing how the field was changing. And something inside of me was just like, this is not it. But I'm the kind of person who believes like, I've seen the vision of this, I have to see it through. And fortunately for me, there was some doors that were closed and opportunities that were basically made no longer available that forced me to listen to that little voice inside my heart, which said, you need to do something different. the scary part was, what is that? Because for most people in medicine, you've invested so much time and so much money getting to this point to be let down, to be honest. But we're so deep in it that we essentially, I think physicians have one of the aspects of excellence, which is the ability to handle pain. And most of us get to that point where we're just like, well, we're here, we're just going to carry it out, even though what brought us here is no longer fulfilling us because it's different than how we thought it would be, the practice of medicine. I'm just fortunate that I was able to take a lateral shift and spend 2 years in a pretty dark place, to be completely honest, because everything I had hoped and dreamed for seemed like it was no longer meant for me, but I didn't know what else I was going to do. And if it wasn't for that time and ultimately me just allowing and surrendering and saying, whatever is meant for me, coming, show yourself. And I probably wouldn't have been here if I just kept my head down or tried to trudge through and figure out, all right, maybe I don't like surgery. Maybe I'll go into emergency medicine or something. Just trying to find a place in the medical world versus thinking differently and trying to take what has currently existed and improve upon it, which is ultimately what led us to create Monarch Athletic Club and our system here. If it wasn't for those difficult times and those roadblocks and challenges, I wouldn't be here at all. So I'm grateful because everything happens exactly as it should. And I'm fortunate that I went with the flow of the river, which I thought was going one way, but started to take me a different way. And I didn't fight it. I just went with it.
Speaking about surrender there, going with the flow. Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Greene. And thank you for also bringing light to something that obviously everybody has their own journey and your dark place. I am so glad you're here too. And you're putting so many amazing things, offerings, game-changing things into the world. So that's truly amazing. Was there a particular moment of inspiration, a spark that changed it all? Or was it a longer process that ended up culminating in what you've created?
There was a particular moment, and I laughed because I was a fellow at Mayo Clinic doing a clinical research fellowship. I thought academia was the world where perhaps I would make my mark. And realized quickly that wasn't going to be it for a multitude of reasons. But if you've never been to Mayo Clinic, it's an amazing place, but it's not near anything large. It's not a large city. It's fairly rural. So I had nothing else to do. I drove one day to Mall of America because it was close and it was something to pass the time. And as funny as it sounds, once I got in there, I looked around and realized like, oh, yeah, this is a model that works. It's everything people want in one place. You park your car once, you could spend days or weeks here. You have everything you need. And then you think about it, you're like, oh, Amazon, Costco, Sam's Club, Walmart. They're not necessarily sexy, but they do well. Why is that? They're efficient, they're convenient. Quality is relatively consistent. So all those things started to come together in my brain and said, why don't we do this with healthcare? Like, why within a hospital system do you need a prescription to go from one practitioner to another? That could take weeks before you can get an appointment. Your body needs, if you're lucky, and especially now post-COVID, that could be months. So I'm just sitting here, I was like, no wonder people can't make progress. It's because so many different things have to happen. And ultimately people just say, way too complicated, takes too much time. I'm just going to do what I've always done and hope for the best. And so that was that like inspirational lightning strike, which was, if you could just bring the critical components within one space, we'll probably do pretty well. And ultimately the human body is incredibly resilient. So if you create an environment for which it to thrive, then we'll do amazing. Think about how long people live now and we don't treat ourselves very well. And we take a bunch of medications to try to balance out our poor lifestyle decisions. So what could happen if we just do the simple things consistently for long periods of time? Like, it's magnificent to think what we could create when we're not worried about why we don't feel well, whether that's physically, mentally, emotionally, or a combination of all those things.
Right. And this is really funny. I never thought I would be thankful to Mall of America, but here we are. That's a beautiful story, Dr. Greene.
I know.
Preventive medicine is becoming increasingly recognized for its role in long-term health and well-being. And what you're doing with Monarch Athletic Club is truly revolutionizing the health and wellness landscape. You have an integrative and medically directed model. So could you please elaborate on how you differentiate yourself at Monarch Athletic Club from other fitness or wellness facilities, and and how all these different aspects come together under this one umbrella?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when we were creating this concept, we recognized that the hook, so to speak, the carrot that most people would respond to, that we were dangling in front of them, was fitness. If I said, "Are you a healthy person?" most people would be like, "Yeah, I exercise, a certain amount of times per week." That those things are correlated. What hasn't been recognized is sleep behavior, hydration, nutrition, metabolic health, right? You're never going to out exercise lack of sleep, dehydration, thyroid issues, hormone issues, vitamin D issues. Yeah, you may get outside, which gets some, but like vitamin D, but ultimately, most people are not focusing on that 80% of the equation, which shouldn't be a surprise then why people are not doing very well. Even though if you look at the data, McKinsey, Deloitte, the number of gyms, number of gym memberships, like number of concepts continues to go up, up, and up. But our health outcomes continue to get worse. So what's the difference there? It's, well, we're not focusing on those simple foundational elements of health. And we are very open. We are not doing anything complex. We believe simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. The Blue Zone communities have modeled exactly what we're doing. So we're creating community. We're helping people understand and be aware of lifestyle behaviors that are trackable: sleep, movement, body composition, blood work. So we've added in the precision, the technological advancements that are available, but the underlying foundation of every one of our clubs and memberships moving forward is you have unlimited access to a healthcare team that is going to work together, the interdisciplinary aspect. We're in constant communication because we can be, each club is relatively small in size, but we're going to use information that we have the ability to collect: sleep, movement, body comp, blood work, hydration, and help you understand why all of these things are important. It's not just one. We have to fill all the buckets. I heard an interesting analogy the other day, which is if you think about your life in totality, there's the sleep aspect, the connection aspect with loved ones, the movement aspect, the health aspect. If any of those buckets is zero, the entire equation is zero. It's math, right? If you multiply anything by zero, it's zero. So we're allowing people to at least have awareness through our system of all these aspects of health. Whether they choose to pursue improvement, they're not in prison. We don't get to control their behavior, but we can continually check in at least once a quarter, which is our model, if not more frequently, because again, they have unlimited access to us, and show them, like, say, hey, you wanted to improve your strength. You wanted to lose body fat. You wanted to improve brain fog. 90 days later, let's see what we've done, both from an objective standpoint, but then also check in and subjectively. Did you work less hours? Did you try to improve your sleep routine? Like, we have those components as well. But the day-to-day is, I'm coming in because I get to work with a strength and conditioning coach or a physical therapist or a combination of the two, because those are daily behaviors I need to develop and implement. And I just so happen to be involved in a system that's going to make sure once a quarter, I'm checking in with the medical team. I'm checking in with the nutrition team. The mental health aspect, as we touched on briefly, is something that we are exceedingly invested in developing, because we don't believe you can treat the body without the mind and the mind without the body. And part of that is looking at hormone health and sleep health. And I think although we've made progress in the mental health awareness space, I've seen from my clinical work outside of the country with psilocybin, there's a lot that can be done just by helping people eat better, move better, regulate their metabolic health and hormones. And you don't even necessarily need to go into some of the more advanced medicinal interventions. So I believe that we really have stumbled upon something that is, again, simple yet sustainable, comprehensive. And I believe that we will continue to be successful, because at the end of the day, we've also created that other intangible aspect of health, which is community. It is incredibly important. Harvard happiness study showed the number one factor that actually contributed to a longer and higher quality of life was connection. Like, what's your emotional and support system look like? And we're increasingly connected, but we're also increasingly isolated. And so we've fallen prey to these technologies of convenience, and we've shifted the timelines back to the day where like people are showing up at their community events on a regular basis. And it just so happens to be a health and wellness facility. Every member gets everything they could possibly want to develop resilience and have the highest opportunity to achieve their goal. We don't believe in fee for service. It's not going to be like car sales where you say, I want this car, and they say it costs this much, but then if you want everything else, it's up. We are all you can eat buffet, except it happens to be for health.
Yes, and that's pretty phenomenal. When I did a deeper dive into Monarch for the certain membership tiers, you get the unlimited personal training, you get the unlimited physician services, you get the unlimited physical therapy, and a whole host of other benefits. You have some cutting edge technologies. You do, I think, cryotherapy. I think you
Cold plunge, yeah.
Cold plunge.
Yeah.
Okay, and you do infrared sauna and IV drips, and it's pretty incredible. So just for me to understand, so since if I were a member, I would be working with physicians, you also can basically prescribe quite a few very important tests to get a baseline of where somebody's at. So
Correct.
is it correct if I imagine that quite a few of these tests would also be covered by insurance?
That is correct. Yes, absolutely. So again, like, I'm grateful that I spent my time in the Western medical world, so to speak. I'm grateful that I ended up doing a fellowship in integrative medicine at University of Arizona with Andrew Weil. So I became a bit more well-rounded in some of these, what we call complementary and alternative therapies, which in other parts of the world, it's just medicine. It's just how they've always done it. But I also understand you have to play the game. Like, this is the system that we have. So how can we operate within this system and maximize outcomes, but also keep costs, which is a consideration, relatively low. There's other concepts that are starting to come out that are starting to look similar to ours, and the price points are pretty high. And what we've learned is people still have to be conditioned to understand that investing in yourself, both time and money, is real, and the cost will come due when you get older. But it's hard for us to think when our 30s and 40s and even in our 50s, if we feel pretty good, like, what is life going to look like 60, 70, and 80? And I believe we have created a very high value for a relatively low cost if you actually utilize all the services, which, again, at least in this community, most people have started to try to figure out how to do those things in part. And the beauty of our model is it scales because our primary price points in terms of cost are rent and cost of labor. And what we charge in Los Angeles is not necessarily what we have to charge in other parts of the country. And I think we can get even more competitive as we continue to expand. And the other interesting aspect of the model is your program is shared amongst our network. You may be a Los Angeles primary, Brentwood, West Hollywood, Playa Vista, whatever. But once we open clubs outside of California, which will happen over the next year and a half, your program travels with you. Because why shouldn't it? It's your health. And I think one of the things that some concepts like Equinox that has 100 locations worldwide, like, there's a value in people knowing at least I can get my workout in. We see that and say, we can take that and improve upon that and say, you have a physician, a physio, a nutritionist, a personal trainer. So whether you're in LA, New York, Miami, Chicago, Dallas, wherever you go, your health doesn't take a day off. So why shouldn't we create something that's integrated no matter where you go? So that was something that we were also incredibly passionate about making a part of the model, is the fact that, like, the language our coaches speak, strength and conditioning coaches, is and should be similar worldwide. Same with medicine, same with physical therapy. Like, what we're doing here in the US is being done everywhere else. So why shouldn't we create the capability in our network to allow anyone, anywhere that's a part of the Monarch system to continue to make progress? every day. Why not?
Absolutely. And talking about pricing real quick, because I know that question will come up in the minds of our audience. You have a silver and a gold, and I think it's a diamond tier. Can you tell us?
Yeah, silver, and then we call it club access, and then all access. We probably should call it gold and diamond. Our price points are off the top. It seems like a lot. So silver is $600 a month. Club access is $1,500. All access is $2K. There are different things that are included in the membership, but the foundational aspect, at least club and all access, is unlimited everything. Silver is a little bit different. We recognize that some people may be pretty self-sufficient and just need less frequent checkpoints from a training standpoint. And also, like, we acknowledge that some people going from $200 to $300 a month from what is considered like top tier fitness or gym brands to 1,500, like, that's a huge jump. Like, I've never spent that much money on myself before. Some people that are in that lower cost silver tier package, often, very often, once they start to see how valuable everything we offer is, quite often increase the membership tier that they want to participate in, because they want more frequent touch points, which is great. That's awesome. We built our model based on the understanding that most people have a gym membership. Most people either do boutique fitness or may have a private personal trainer, whether that's through their gym or independently. And private personal training in LA is $150 an hour. So if you do that 2 to 3 times a week, you are already spending equal, if not more, depending on how much your trainer charges, than what we have on a monthly membership basis. And what they don't have, but we have, is you get your blood work quarterly. You have a nutritionist that you can meet with as often as you want. Our facilities are very high end. And again, my partners in this business are in the hospitality space. And we fully believe, like, why can't you have health and wellness and also feel high end? Like, why do they have to be mutually exclusive? Why do gyms have to be sweaty and smelly and things like that? So we have beautiful locker rooms, we have saunas, we have cold plunges, we have recovery modalities provided by TheraBody. So you have all of those components, leg compression, things like that. And so the value is enormous, especially if you use it. But if you're only going to use it a couple times a month, then it's probably not going to make sense for you. But ultimately, if you're truly motivated to make some sort of lifestyle or healthcare change, what we see in the health world is a race to zero. Who can charge the least and get the most members? But ultimately, we recognize, we're not going to be free, but we're also not going to price gouge you. Like, we recognize that there's an investment that's required, just like anything worth doing in life. And we really work hard to try to keep our value high, but our costs very low.
For sure. And that also comes across. It is definitely a premium investment for most people. And at the same time, as you also pointed out, the pricing for what the individuals would get is really fair. Especially, I have my eyes across the landscape, and I see also what other places in the field who are doing similar things, but not as concentrated and all embracing as you are charging. Talking about also, and as you mentioned before, the cost of getting older and maybe having a little bit of a longer lifespan than our parents, but spending quite a few of our last years in misery because our health span has not improved at the same time. That can be absolutely not only miserable, but can also really make you not be able to partake in life anymore, physically, cognitively, be productive, be with your family. So taking care of your health, investing into your health is definitely something that shouldn't be missed. And just because we're doing well earlier in life, to not lose that out of sight and do preventative work thing. And another part of this also is the insurance model. Here in the US specifically, I am German born. I've been living here now for close to 20 years. So it's interesting for me to see the difference between, for example, the European insurance models and here in the US. You have also talked about reforming insurance models by incentivizing healthier lifestyles. So I'd like to hear from you, Dr. Greene. How do you propose integrating preventive and performance-based care into the existing insurance models to create a more sustainable healthcare system?
Yeah, that's interesting. Try to reform what currently exists is a longer time horizon. Fortunately, we are seeing some payers start to incentivize, like dip their toes into data collection, data sharing. I've seen the model 20 years ago where if you sent in fitness facility check-ins on a quarterly basis, there's a reimbursement for healthy behavior, but there wasn't actually any data that was collected to prove that people were getting healthier, which is typically why those plans are abandoned, because they don't actually see any ROI in terms of reduced costs their end. They just see greater spending with nothing on the back end, if that makes sense. Meaning I saw a model where 95% of a gym membership was covered as long as you proved you checked in 3 times a week. The downside is, what did those people do? And I literally saw folks walk in, they scanned their checking card, they turned around and walked away. So like it was never going to be successful because the intention behind it was people are going, they're doing something healthy, but the guardrails weren't in place to actually prove that progress was being made. Big picture, especially with the insurance companies in the United States, like it's trying to turn the Titanic. I think it's a big system to shift. I believe it's available, but I think there are going to be players such as Apple, Amazon, that are a little bit more motivated. They're not as deeply entrenched in the healthcare system, that are ultimately going to use our data. Like, it's being shared already. And I believe the model is coming very soon where you will be able to share data that is already being transmitted and use it for your benefit. So if you can prove that you're moving and that your body composition is within certain parameters and you're minimizing your risk for heart disease and diabetes, these areas that cost us collectively in the United States trillions of dollars on an annual basis, I definitely believe there are groups that are actively working on opportunities that will allow people to, like yourself and myself, to have lower cost, higher value healthcare, because we are actively investing, whether it's time, money, or effort, in keeping ourselves lower risk. And so I believe the model exists, and it's probably going to be Apple, Amazon, or the like. From the Monarch standpoint, it's interesting because as we continue to open up more clubs, we have more people with more data that we can essentially create like a health system within the health system, meaning there's a world where Monarch members, other than for emergency or highly specialized care, can pretty much get everything they need taken care of within the walls of a club. And that also includes a possible insurance model. And there's proof of concept in religious and faith-based organizations that essentially have co-ops where people can pay into a faith-based co-op and they say, hey, we're putting money every month into this pot. And then if a healthcare bill were to come up, we are only responsible for a certain amount. Everything else comes out of this collective. But you get a group of people, a community, again, reflecting back on that, that feel like they're doing something good for people that share similar beliefs. I may not use this healthcare plan very often, but someone who has a similar lifestyle or similar belief may, and I would like my money to go to a good cause, which is helping someone out in a hard time. So that already exists. Those faith-based co-ops exist. I think we can do the same thing within our community, but just a little bit better, because we have the ability to say, hey, like, this is how you qualify for this plan, high value, low cost, but you actually have to do something. You have to show up, you have to participate, you have to get your blood work done, so that we can make sure that you are progressing towards a happier, healthier, higher functioning version of yourself. Safe driver discounts for car insurance. Like, it's all around us. We've already been doing it, just in the healthcare space. For whatever reason, we haven't approached it, maybe because the system is as entrenched as it is. And even in European nations where you have nationalized health, this makes even more sense, because you could put the Monarch system in Germany and places like that, and they can look at and assess what we're doing and saying, okay, we're keeping the German or whatever country's citizens objectively healthier from developing these things that are costing us a lot of money, like musculoskeletal, heart disease, diabetes. It's not just the US problem, it's a global problem. So if you can show how we can keep costs down, especially for nations that are responsible for their citizens from birth to death, it's an even easier sell versus the more capitalistic program in America.
For sure. And I think it's a bigger picture shift that needs to happen aside from incentivizing or encouraging individuals to live healthier, because oftentimes individuals find themselves in, let's say, it's food deserts, or we all live in a place where unhealthy foods basically get their subventions for unhealthy foods, for processed foods. But a lot of people don't have access, either don't have physical access to healthy, organic, whole foods, or they can't afford them. And so there's so many things that play into that, where a much bigger shift needs to take place. Or individuals live in places, all of us living in an urban environment, especially, you were exposed to toxins. We can't help it. I can go to Whole Foods and Erewhon all I want. There's still certain things I need to do, which thank goodness I have the knowledge of. And I also have the access to the products, to the protocols, to the supplements to regularly help my body get rid of the burden. There's a lot of things that play into that. I like what you brought up, the concept of a community, basically, that takes care of itself, which also reminds me of what they talked about and also showed in the documentary Blue Zones. I think it was in Japan, where older individuals would get together and they'd form these groups and they'd all pay into a pot in case some unforeseen expense health-wise would come up for one of the members. And out of that, also friendships would develop. So it was not only, yeah, it's a beautiful thing. And community, again, here we're again with community, which would enhance all over health, specifically mental health, amongst other. You've touched upon it before, Dr. Greene, and I have a particular interest in mental health, not only because of some of the ventures I am part of in the space, but also because the connection between chronic diseases and the psychological component is huge, and it's really been overlooked, especially in our culture. And I would like to know you've mentioned it before, you're going to have a big focus also on mental health at Monarch, which I think is wonderful. And how do you foresee the role that mental health and addressing potential mental health issues, what role will that play in the management and treatment of any conditions, especially if you have members who are dealing with chronic health conditions?
I think it's paramount, and it's one of those things that has been constantly on the forefront of my consciousness since we started this. And to be honest, I am the best teacher of myself, which ultimately trickles down into our community, which is my mental health journey, my ability to navigate things that were problematic for me, the tools that I found were important that I think will be beneficial. And I've invested my own time and money in contributing towards the advancement of the science and in terms of psilocybin and things like that with athletes and veterans that unfortunately we have to do outside of the United States at this point, but hopefully soon will be able to be performed as the legislation shifts. But I have someone in my life who's played an incredibly profound part in helping me understand the emotional aspect of health too. So some people call it mental health. I think there's an emotional aspect there. And the bridge between what we can measure, what we can physically measure, but also what we know is stored within us that is intangible. We can try to understand with neurofeedback or brain mapping, and we can look at blood work, but there's also things that are happening that we can't necessarily quantify. And I think the emotionality of that is the emotional understanding, the emotional IQ, so to speak, is incredibly important. And I am hopeful that our continued focus on these foundational tenets of human existence will allow us not only to improve body, but also mind. And because of that, emotionally and spiritually, I think there's a huge aspect there. I don't know if you've read Dr. Vanderdonk's book, The Body Keeps the Score, but it's a seminal piece of work understanding what we are now talking about in epigenetics and methylation and how trauma transfers through generations. Like, the emotions are real, and that aspect, whether you call it mental health, emotional health, the combination of the two, I don't think is super important. But ultimately, that is an aspect that I am finding is pretty significant in terms of helping us understand how someone who's a part of the Monarch community is going to get better. And to be honest, like, it's as simple as the fact that you potentially as a member get to meet with a similar team of healthcare professionals multiple times And once you start to feel familiar, then you actually talk about things that matter and the things that are not brought up in a traditional healthcare environment, because you don't want to be judged. You're ashamed. Like, how many people, when they're asked how many alcoholic beverages they drink, woefully underrepresent because they know that their answer is not going to be good. So they just don't tell the truth. I think that aspect of what we're offering is allowing for a lot of these barriers, emotionally, shame, anxiety, whatever, to be broken down so that we can actually make meaningful progress, regardless of the avenue, whether it's strength training, whatever. I think it's a huge aspect. So I'm really excited about what we're doing with the Monarch Mind concept. And I have big hopes and dreams that we will be able to become an institution that integrates ketamine work and MDMA and psilocybin in addition to all the other aspects, because I really do believe that in order to be successful, we have to address all aspects of health.
Yes, that resonates deeply. And I also have great hopes for we've already been working with ketamine at Gateway Clinics for 3 years now. We've talked about it briefly before I hit record, and the incredible transformations that we have witnessed from patients coming in who were just, you could see they're carrying the weight of the world. Some of them can't look you into the eyes. They're just in a place that is so difficult and dark. And sometimes even after the first treatment, the whole physicality changes, the whole expression changes, and it's been so gratifying. I'm so grateful we're able to provide this, and I hope psilocybin will become rescheduled soon. I'm guessing from what I hear, I'm curious, what do you hear? It's maybe another 12, 24 months out. MDMA, of course, we now have had, it sounds like this August, it will get rescheduled, which is unheard of. The FDA gave MAPS actually a date. And so it's really interesting times we're living in. And I think it's also important that these medicines become available in a clinical environments for quite a few reasons. Number one, of course, is safety and being also able to really tailor the dosage and the experience to the individual patient. And the second reason is also to keep it going, to not give anybody any reason to shut this down. This movement is way too important, and there's so many people suffering out there that can be helped by this. And the more tools we have to address people's challenges, the better. That being said, a lot of these tools are also either not accessible legally or geographically, or also financially for many people. We've talked a little bit about this before. The health disparities and the inequities, they do remain a really huge challenge in global healthcare. And I'd like to know from you, are there any initiatives you believe that would be essential to actually bridge this gap and ensure that the kind of healthcare that you believe in, that I believe in, that kind of healthcare is accessible to all, regardless of socioeconomic status?
That's a really good question. And I don't have any solid initiatives set forth. We're playing around with the idea of a Monarch Foundation, which essentially will allow us to repurpose with great integrity the fruits of our labor to help bridge the gap between those people who can't afford or can't have or don't have access to some of the things that we're doing. I would love to believe that if we continue this movement, showing, for instance, last year we spent $4 trillion subsidizing heart disease, diabetes, sedentary lifestyle, obesity, right? All preventable things. 4 trillion. That's up from $1 trillion 20 years ago. I would love to believe that if concepts like Monarch continue to grow and scale, and we are able to reduce that spending, even a percent, like a percent of $4 trillion is a significant amount of money. Could that be used to go towards bridging the gaps in food deserts, right? Like allowing people to have access to maybe not Monarch as it currently exists today, but a space that's operating a system that we've created. There's nothing that we're doing, like I said, that's incredibly difficult. So if we can license out the ability to do what we do to rural communities where we may not be putting a club anytime soon, like how do we do that? Again, like using our cell phones, but to create an in your hand version of what we're doing is something that's in development. The beautiful aspect of AI and the investment there is, to be honest, there's probably a world within the next 5 to 10 years where on the palm of your hand, you have a trainer, you have a nutritionist We can get your blood work done pretty much anywhere these days, minimally invasive, low cost. The information that's coming from a lot of these AI-driven healthcare platforms is probably equal, if not better in some cases, than what practitioners are even providing, because it's constantly available and constantly being updated. So I think there's really an opportunity where we'll be able to take this Monarch idea and put it in the palm of your hand, where you can do it anywhere in the country or the world for 10% of the cost, right? Because the technology will get better and the costs will continue to go down. So we're absolutely thinking about like, what's the foundation aspect of like where we're giving, we're repurposing with the highest integrity and love in our successes. What does the technological aspect look like so we can get, we call it like the Netflix version of Monarch. How can we get this in the home or in the hand of everyone on the planet? Because technologically things have developed considerably, but they're still in their own little verticals and silos where everyone wants you just using one thing or the other. Using our concept and our mindset is like, how do we integrate? We don't need to reinvent anything, but how do we make it work better together for the benefit of the community? Those are the things that we're thinking about. And to be honest, I am fully of the belief where, you know, we may have to do it ourselves and just use our successes and practice the principles of compounding, where if we continue to give over longer periods of time, that becomes exponentially more impactful. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to use our space to educate. We're already having young students who are going into med school or PT school, like, want to learn, how do I do what you do? So we're starting to see that trickle effect, and perhaps we can continue planting that seed. So at least we can create more conscious minded practitioners who are going out and thinking differently, who are not necessarily into the traditional healthcare paradigms.
Yes, I love all of these ideas, Dr. Greene, and I can relate a little bit on a lot of the ventures that I'm tied into. We face similar things. How can you bring these cutting edge treatments to people who right now just are not financially in a place to afford them? And there's so many in need. And of course, when you're running a company, you got to cover costs, you got to make sure it stays in integrity, you provide the highest possible quality treatments, et cetera, et cetera. And unless you're a nonprofit, you also need to make money. You need to be able to keep reinvesting in your venture and making it bigger. So these are things I'm quite familiar with. I love your approach, your thoughts. And from my perspective, for example, for some of the things that we offer, I'm also noticing that certain insurance companies are slowly waking up. There's not per se treatments are covered by insurance, but we've seen success where insurances at least cover a little bit. So hopefully at some point, insurances will also realize, okay, for certain protocols or treatments, it's actually not only the right thing to do, but it actually practically, economically is the smarter thing to do for insurances, actually helping somebody heal from something, really overcome challenges versus keeping someone for decades in the loop of taking tons of medications in and out of the hospitals, in and out of surgeries. And so the cost for the insurances is huge, and the cost for us as a society, of course, is huge as well. So I'm hoping that systems will catch up. Global health trends, they often provide insights into emerging health challenges and also opportunities. And since you are really deeply immersed in the field, Dr. Greene, what are some of the most critical global health trends you are observing? And how do you think our healthcare system should adapt and address these?
Trends in terms of like treatments and practices, or just like movements overall?
Both. Yes, definitely.
I'm a little concerned with the GLP-1 conversation is pretty interesting in terms of Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, things like that. And it's interesting because it's become prevalent at a time where there's literature coming out regarding the importance of basically just muscle mass and strength and its impact on cognitive function, especially as we see a growing and aging population that's living longer, as you mentioned. And yet, part of that's going to be necessary to consider is, okay, we're living older, we're living longer, excuse me, but how are we maintaining quality of life, right? How are we able to remain independent so we can perform activities of daily living? So it's just a really interesting time because we have a overweight and obese population globally. that's been shown a pathway to remedy a lot of those things. But at the same time, we are seeing that's causing people to lose a lot of muscle mass, a lot of strength. It's impacting hormone health. It's impacting mental health. So again, for every good, there are a handful of things that may be not so good. And the other side, we're seeing this emergence. I saw an article in British Journal of Sports Medicine that came out a couple of weeks ago that has basically said like health span should also be called strength span. So like how long can you maintain your strength? Because again, like, you know, when we start losing that muscle mass, which is inevitable, and for women, you have to think about hormone health and its impact on bone density and muscle mass, like your lack of capacity creates a significant burden, both physically, emotionally, and also financially. The United States, assisted living is not covered by insurance. And on average, it's like $1,000 a day. Like, do you pay for that? Does your family pay for that? Is there an emotional stress that's added because they want to take care of mom or dad? So it's just an interesting time that I'm fascinated by, because we have a overweight population that's been shown how to lose weight, which should be helpful. But at the same time, it's going to deplete this very critical tissue needed for physical and mental health, which is muscle mass. And we're seeing more evidence, which is we need people to actually eat protein and lift weights. And so it's two things that are happening that are dichotomous, but they're happening at the same time. So I think that's the biggest trend I'm interested in. Also, because the cost of these medications is not insignificant. Speaking of health disparity, but our price point's roughly $1,000, $1,500 a month. And yet people are like forking that over to pay $1,200 a month for Ozempic, Wegovy, and Mounjaro. And I'm like, are you going to do this the rest of your life? And if so, like, why not just come to a Monarch and do it in a sustainable way that's going to, you know what I'm saying, benefit you for a long time. So it's funny to see the psychology of human beings, which is like, no workout programs ever work for me, so I'm going to spend $1,200 a month on this injection. And I was just like, we're new, so we haven't gotten large enough yet where we can capture that market share. But I just think it's a very interesting premise.
Indeed, yes. And I also have a lot of second thoughts with the medications you just brought up. I certainly know people in my circle of acquaintances who are using it, and everybody needs to make their own decisions. This also comes with biological freedom, which I strongly believe in. For me, it's not an option. I rather go down a different route. And as we're coming to the conclusion of this conversation, I'd like to learn from you. You have optimized yourself mentally, physically, and spiritually for decades now, Dr. Greene. Is there a particular practice that you could share with us? Maybe it's something new, something you just discovered, or maybe it's something you've been consistently doing for many years and that you would consider at the top of really supporting your overall well-being.
I'm going to answer that in two parts. One is something that I've been doing for a very long time, which is routine. I never sacrifice my hydration program, my movement program. Movement for me is meditation. It's an opportunity to nourish my body, nourish my mind. I always make time for that. And then also from a nutritional standpoint, I just find investing in higher quality foods that are going to nourish my body is worth it. And like, I've been in med school, I've been in fellowship, I've been making minimum wage. Like, I understand that like cost is a factor, but something that was taught to me is how you fuel is how you feel. So for me, it's worth a little extra investment in higher quality food. So that's what I've been doing for a long time, is my health routine, my mental health, physical health is, I will not deviate from that. The newer aspect is the stuff that we've been talking about, the mental health area, microdosing protocols. I'm very passionate about psilocybins, being more consistent in my mental health practice, which is whether it's microdosing or participating in larger group healing ceremonies with the collective. It's uncomfortable for me because being seen, being witnessed is vulnerable. But I know that's a huge aspect of how I will be successful, keeping accountable to myself and making sure I'm participating in those practices.
Super. Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Greene. And thank you so much for making time for us today. It was really a pleasure to talk with you.
It's been amazing. Thanks. You have a beautiful day.